Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So today we're not using Procreate today, as I wanted to show you guys another app that you can use to do pixel art on your iPad or on your iPhone. So in my little art folder on my iPad, I do have this app called Pixquare, which we are currently in right now, and I have this really cute little interface. So I'll talk a little bit more about the app, but let's go ahead and show you guys kind of like the customization already of the aesthetic of the app. So I'm gonna hit the little gear and I'm gonna go to theme customization, scroll down to show you what the default looks like, which is this kind of retro, kind of cool gray that's very neutral looking. I feel like there's a lot of customization for just the general aesthetic of the app, but there's some like presets ones that you already can use from other artists, such as this yellow one. But the pink and blue aesthetic that I currently have is just me playing around with some of the colors, so I'm going to be using this one for the rest of the video. So Pixquare is a pixel art app for the iPad as well as iPhone. So I'm going to show you guys kind of like my testing canvas that I was using earlier to kind of do a little bit of practice here and there. So starting off, I'm going to be showing you guys some of the menus. So right here has the menus for the gestures that you might want to use. Next to it, we have our little, I think they're like guides so that you can use the rulers. Then after that, you have the color palette and all your color swatches. Next to that, we have our layers, and this will be also for animations and just like general layer setting and tools that you might need to refer to. Like I said, a lot of the menus are hidden, but everything is like pretty much available. And then after that is the reference tool, and above that is the navigator. So I'm going to be showing you guys quickly right here that you can place images by using the reference little window, and you can use that to help you for wanting to reference an image without having to split your screen on the iPad. And then this little window is kind of like your navigator, or what I like to use it for is a second view of a zoomed out version of your pixel art. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys also that all of these menus are pretty much all pop-outable, or like you can make them floating. So you can literally customize them to be more fitted to whatever layout that you want. So you can move it around to make it more optimized towards your own workflow. Then at the top of the interface, we have all of our tools. So we have our move tool, and then there's like other options that you click if you click on the tool once again. So after that, we have our brush eraser, and then we have our line tool as well. So you can see many options alongside with that. Then we have our shape tool. We have our selection tool, which I have currently set to kind of like a freehand one. We have our bucket. Then after that, we have the eyedropper, which also has an option as well. And the triple dots give you even more tools and options and settings that you might want to fiddle with, which there is one that I love using, which we'll talk about in a bit. So while I was practicing with kind of getting more used to the interface, you can kind of see that on Hansuke, there's these little grid lines right here. So it happens when you zoom in really close, making your pixels very precise. But once you zoom out, you can actually get a full view of your kind of pixel art without having the grid lines in the way. I found this app very easy to use coming from like other art programs. So we also have our color wheel or like your hue saturation sliders as well. Also, one thing I really love is the fact that you can actually rotate in this app. I believe some apps that I've seen, you can't really rotate the canvas and it's like pretty much just stationary, but I find it really nice that you can rotate it so it's more comfortable for you to draw. On the left-hand side of our interface, we have the brush size, which is the top bar. So you can kind of adjust the width of your brush to make it larger or smaller, depending if you're trying to fill in larger areas or smaller areas. Then the little bar below that is our opacity slider. So I'm going to take advantage of this because I find it the easiest way to actually manage to do some kind of rough sketch before we actually commit to the final piece. I'm nowhere near proficient using any kind of tools and stuff to make any kind of pixel art look really nice, but I like to dabble here and there, so I will be using that as much as I can. And the last thing I want to kind of introduce is also the contour tool, which I find super helpful to kind of fill in larger areas and shapes to make filling in shapes much quicker instead of doing lines and then using the bucket tool to fill. So the second practice little drawing that I did was of Albin Knox from Niji En. I was doing something else earlier, so I just wanted to doodle him kind of in the pixel art style. And then after that, I ended up doing these kind of like bouquet of flowers, and I did take advantage of using the outline function, which I have been finding very helpful. I use it a lot to kind of give some things a sticker effect or just to give a general outline. Also did one of Kaisen, kind of reminiscent of my little plush of him. And then I think we're good to go with doing kind of like a full illustration or a drawing that's a little bit more ambitious to kind of fully test out a pixel art app like Pixquare. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process first, and then we can get into just like general experience of using this app and any information that you guys might be interested into as well. So I mentioned earlier that I am not very experienced with doing pixel art, but I definitely love the aesthetic of it, and I like to kind of dabble here and there doing pixel art. So to kind of start off, I am choosing a fairly dark color and the smallest little brush size that we can, and I'm using the brush at a very low opacity. Now, a lot of the footage for this particular piece will be in time-lapse because I want to show you guys the entirety of mostly the drawing process for this, because I think it's kind of interesting to watch people do pixel art, so I decided to do that instead of watching me place squares one by one. So in terms of who we're drawing today, I am drawing Kinich from Genshin Impact. Now, technically, I have not met him in the game quite yet, as I haven't done the recent Archon quest or like the recent storyline in Natlan. I've been just kind of exploring and doing some like general world quests in Natlan currently. So I do like his general vibe and design, so I kind of wanted to give him a go, alongside with the fact that I think he fits perfectly with like pixel art in general. So him with like a bunch of the colors and just like the general almost like pixel motif all around his design, I think is kind of neat. But also, I believe his name is Ajaw or Ajaw, the little pixel companion guy that kind of like bothers him and stuff, is also done in pixel art, so I find it very fitting. I will be placing him at the end anyways, so you'll probably see that. So while I'm working, even though I have the reference window open in Pixquare, I do have Kinich on my phone as well, because the angle of which the reference that I'm using on the reference window kind of makes it hard to see his outfit because he does have his body turned. Now, unfortunately also, I do not stick with this pose. I end up changing it, which I think makes me dislike the art a little bit, but I think it was just good practice for me to understand a little bit more of how I want to potentially do other pixel art and stuff in the future. And just to preface this as well, I'm not going to be using like a very specific color palette or limited colors like some people do for that general retro style or kind of more of a unique, cohesive look to their pixel art. I'm just going to be fiddling around and trying to get Kinich to look like himself, which you can tell me if he does or doesn't. I'm going to struggle quite a bit, but I did find it a lot easier for me to sketch in this kind of manner. So even though it's like pixel art, I do like doing some kind of full sketch if I don't have a good like inkling of what I want to do. I'll show you guys a different method later on because I'll do something a little bit more simple because we'll be doing two different sessions. So as I'm doing the sketching, I am relying a lot on the opacity so I can build up value and kind of flesh out a little bit of form. So with this menu down here, I am going to add a new layer, bring it to the bottom and select our previous layer and kind of fade down our sketch with the opacity slider so that we can do the colors and or line art on top. So I'm a little impatient, so I decided not to do line art first, which might have been a mistake, and I like doing this method where you kind of block out colors and shadows and shapes instead of having to do colors and then filling in. I think the look of it becomes a little bit messy in terms of like how I approach it, but it makes a little bit more sense in my brain to flesh it out this way instead of trying to figure out like the line art to be super clean and not making like certain corners look kind of funky or like making sure that things were straight. Some artists that I've seen are very precise with their pixel art and stuff, making sure that like, you know, certain corners aren't like super jagged or like, you know, you don't have that weird outlier of a pixel hanging out on your little canvas. But I'm going to be working kind of messy. I spend a lot of time on his face and not as much on the body and the pose, so I do apologize about that. So while I'm kind of fleshing out Kinich, let's talk about the app a little bit. So in general, I haven't really used any other pixel art app, like an app that's specific for pixel art. I've done a video, and you guys probably have seen it, where I've done pixel art in Procreate, and there's like a lot of hoops and things you have to do to get to do pixel art in Procreate because it's not really meant for that. So you kind of have to do custom brushes. You have to play around with some of the settings so that you can kind of get like a grid formation going so that you don't make things kind of wonky in terms of placing your pixels on the canvas. So that's just kind of like little things that I find annoying when having to, I guess, like potentially do pixel art on Procreate. It's definitely possible, and there's like a lot of tutorials on how people do it, but I found having an app that's specifically made for the particular art style or like process just makes things like 100% easier. So I technically prefer doing my pixel art either in Painter's Sai or on Clip Studio Paint more recently, but I think moving forward I will be using this app instead. One, it's portable, so I believe it's available besides on the iPad, it's available on your iPhone on iOS, which is great, so you can definitely work on this on the go. And I do like the fact that even though this is a paid app, it does allow you to do a little bit of testing by having the free version, and you can test whether or not you like probably like the layout and the format of everything to see if you can kind of get like a workflow going for yourself. And then if you do enjoy the experience, then you can purchase the full app with full access, which I think is great because it allows you to still have the opportunity to try it out before committing. I'll probably say it at the very end of the video as well, but if you're interested in buying the app or taking a look at the app, feel free to use my promo code RINSPIRIT. I'll leave the things down below if you're interested to try out this app as well. And also the creator of this app is just very sweet and very kind and very helpful, so I definitely feel like you should check out the app and support the creator if you can. But talking a little bit more about the experience of using the app, like I mentioned, I found myself having not really any issues kind of like transitioning from an art app on the iPad or like on desktop to this particular app. I think a lot of the things that are on the menuing and on the screen are very intuitive, so they're placed in a way that I feel like it's very familiar to other previous kind of like art apps. And I do like the fact that a lot of your tools are kind of placed on the screen, but a lot of like the other extra features or settings that you need are hidden kind of like by hidden menus, which keeps your interface like very clean and like not claustrophobic feeling. And you can always like pop out menus or hide all your menus to give you more space, or if you want access to your tools all the time, you can definitely have that instead. And I also like the cute touch that you can kind of customize your colors and your theme a little bit. So for me, I did do more of a pink and blue theme for carrot colors because I think it would have looked cute. I'm debating on making more of like a green one as well, or like a green and brown one to fit Masaki and kind of more like the clover and floral motif. I'll do that probably in the future, but for now, I'm using, I think, the selection tool, which is kind of giving the wavy line look for his shirt, to make sure that I'm getting some of the values kind of more correct. I ended up just kind of skimping out on certain details for his outfit. I don't know if it was the best idea to do a Genshin character for the pixel art on a larger scale like this when I'm super inexperienced. So I do apologize to anybody who really knows more about pixel art. That's probably like, oh my god, it's like super messy, like all these lines could have been fixed if you paid more attention to like the angle of it, and like, you know, I feel like there's a lot of things. I've dabbled enough in pixel art to know there's like some general rules on kind of like the aesthetic of it that makes it a little bit easier to read or make things look less jaggedy and more clean. But I don't really care for that at the moment. Maybe in the future when I do like more pixel art on a smaller scale where each individual pixel kind of matters. At this larger scale, I don't really mind because once you zoom out, you can still kind of differentiate a lot of the things anyways. But like I mentioned, the process for this was a lot of me using the contour tool. I'm sorry if this is going to get like a little bit dizzying because of how fast the footage must be going. I do a lot of back and forth and zooming in and out anyways, but I use the contour tool a lot, and it makes it a lot easier for me to block out shapes and a lot of the different, let's say like his clothing, his sleeves, the cuffs, skin, hair, and all that jazz, because it's sometimes hard for me to imagine what something's gonna look like when I just do the lines. Sometimes I need to see like the actual physical form to see more of a... I don't know exactly how to describe it. I do the same thing for eyes. So if you ever watched me draw like eyes where I'm doing like full color and stuff, where I'm doing line art, I tend to fill the entire iris to be a solid color first, and then later on I'll be clipping layers to it and filling in the kind of like shapes, let's say like the highlights, the pupils, and everything else afterwards. And it's just because I find it easier to see which way the character is looking instead of doing the pupils and not putting in the highlights and stuff and doing that afterwards. I find it very hard for me to see exactly where the character is looking if it's blank on the inside. Oh, and the last thing I did for this piece, like after I finished majority of Kinich, I ended up drawing a jaw. And I tried my best to map out the pixels in a very similar manner so that he looks recognizable. And this is kind of like what I mean, that if you use like less pixels or like on a smaller scale, each pixel kind of matters rather than like on a larger scale. You can kind of finagle your way in terms of like interpretation, but at such a small scale like this, each pixel is gonna make things look quite different. So like even the little pixel for his tooth is just like 1 or 2 blocks, so it's like it kind of makes a difference. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm taking advantage of the outline tool once again. I ended up just duplicating the Kinich little layer so that I could do the kind of outline tool or setting so that we can kind of get a outline of one color, and then I duplicated that so that we can get a drop shadow of a solid fill after that, so that it kind of matches each pixel instead of rather than just like the inside, if that makes sense. And I think that's it for Kinich. So yeah, it's not my favorite drawing. I think I just don't like how I drew his face. Oh, and exporting is actually quite nice. I don't do it here because I didn't notice until a little bit later. So I'm gonna put a screenshot right here. So you can change the size multiplier, which is, I think this one's at 5 times. So this is kind of at a much larger scale, and it's not like fuzzy or anything. It's just much of a higher quality because I was working on a very small canvas in terms of like if you would normally make a canvas for your actual drawing, it would be a lot bigger. So yeah, let's move on to our little last session, I guess. So I personally liked how my first little attempt at doing the bouquet of flowers looked like. So I thought I'll take you guys along with me, not in the weird time-lapse mode, and do another bouquet of flowers. So in this case, I'm not really using the contour tool like I did before, nor am I doing actually like a proper sketch with the lowered opacity either. So instead, I'm doing a combination of using a larger brush and a smaller brush to kind of do a very rough silhouette of the bouquet that I want to do. I am referencing a bouquet from Pinterest, but I don't think they look similar enough for me to even put it on the screen. I'm mostly referencing it for like specific flower combinations and just like the colors as well. So after that, I went ahead and alpha locked my layer and am kind of starting with filling in our, I was gonna say fabric, I guess it's the paper for the bouquet that's like kind of encasing it. So I'm trying to figure out where to place certain colors, and I'll place the bow, I'll do some of the flower petals and kind of differentiate the shapes a little bit before we add too much detail. But because I am not super confident, and I do this a lot if I'm not confident with drawing a certain thing or if I'm like drawing with a different medium, is that I'll kind of hyper focus on one area to see if I kind of like what it looks like with the method that I'm using. And then once I feel like it's comfortable enough, I'll go back and fill everything else in once again. And then we can go back to doing kind of like simple to more detailed. It's just kind of like my thought process for when I'm kind of trying to get used to something, but I feel too negative about how I view what it looks like currently, because I was not sure how this is gonna turn out, and maybe I just got lucky with the blue bouquet. So I went ahead and did more of the rendering and detailing on the bow, and then we moved on to kind of like blocking out and blobbing in a lot of the flower shapes. So the bouquet here had more of like daisy flowers, which are like white and yellow, and then there were a few pink tulips, and then there was like one kind of like beige cream colored rose in the center, which I tried my best to do. I'm pretty sure it's very difficult to see because of the lighting of my iPad, but you can see how easy it is to do pixel art in this app. And I love that when you zoom in, it gives you the grid lines, so it's just easier to place like individual pixels to make things look a little bit more clean. Like I mentioned, if you're working on a smaller scale, the pixels matter a little bit more because you have less to work with. So kind of like a little goes a long way. I guess maybe that makes more sense. But I had a lot of fun just like playing around with pixel art once again. Like I mentioned, I do dabble here and there, and I do a lot of like pixel chibis and sticker designs. Like recently, I think I did the ones for ensemble stars. I did like little chibis, headshots of them, and then I also did a whole bunch of drinks as well, like pixel drinks, which I think turned out pretty cute. So once again, I'm going to be taking advantage of the outline feature. So what I did for the outlines is that I actually duplicated the flower bouquet layer once again, and then I did the outline tool on the duplicate layer, and then we alpha locked it so that I can just color the outlines only, because I placed the outline version below my flower layer so that the outline is kind of like sticking around everything, so that I can just change it manually instead of having to commit just to one color via the outline tool. So I kind of wish I figured out about this app a little bit earlier when I was doing a lot of pixel art on the go, because I was debating on whether or not I would just like suck it up and just do it on Procreate, but I was struggling too much, so I ended up not doing a lot of pixel art when I was like out and about. But here's kind of like the finished result of our little mini bouquet of flowers, which I think turned out pretty cute, alongside with my blue one and the one of Kinich. So like I mentioned, if you guys are interested in trying out Pixquare, I highly recommend it, and especially if you're a pixel artist on the go, definitely check out the promo code in the description and check out Pixquare as well. And I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!